Oh, thank you. I know it's been a minute, right?
It's been like it's been like 6 years, 7 years maybe.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, with everything that's happened in those 6 years, a lot has happened.
I know. And I've seen you transform also, and now
hmm
you're into, is it Sufism?
It is. It's Sufism. I think some people say Sufism, but
Sufism.
we
Okay.
say Sufism in our
Okay.
lineage.
Sufism.
Yeah.
That's the same. Is that like Shams of Tabriz?
Yes. Yes. Rumi.
Yeah.
Sufism has many different what they call tariqas, and those are going to be different branches of Sufism. So, for instance, like our branch, the Shadaliya way, does not do the whirling or some of the sort of iconic Sufi things. We
Okay.
don't necessarily do those, and we're not as heavily involved in some of the music. So those are other lineages of Sufism that are more celebratory in the rajas and the different musical dimensions. We're focused in a way. Our lineage focuses a lot on healing.
That makes sense. Knowing you, who you are. I love that.
Yes,
And
exactly.
the first time I learned about Sufism was in the 40 Rules of Love. Have you read
Oh,
that book?
I haven't. No.
It's such a good book. My best friend got it for me. I think when I was going through my dark night of the soul, and I was like
Mm,
trying to hang on to someone, looking for love, in all the wrong places. And and she's like, I think you need to read this book. And it's a love
oh,
story between Shams and Rumi.
oh,
Um, Not necessarily like a sexual or physically intimate kind of love, but just a very pure, spiritual, deep kind of love. And it just really opened my eyes to how we can connect and find love everywhere, not just in a partner. And
yes,
that was my first
yes.
knowing of Sufism, and it was
Oh,
beautiful.
that's beautiful. Yeah, Sufism really focuses on the heart. It's fundamentally a heart-based awakening and a heart-based enlightenment. And so, love, lover, the beloved, all these dimensions of love and all the manifestations of it are very rich and very much a part of the tradition. So, no, that's beautiful. I'm glad it met you where you needed to be met.
Yeah, it was a very special book. I hold it very dear. Like I always think about it when I think of love.
Mm.
So yeah,
hmm
I recommend reading it if you haven't.
Yes.
It'll be worth it. But
Thank you.
so I've seen you evolve through so many different practices, which is amazing because I just love how you're like, what's this and what's this and what's this? And we're gonna a little bit of that, a little bit of this. So how did you find your way to Sufism?
Oh my goodness, Crystal. Yeah. I mean, knowing me, when it came, I just sat there in disbelief and a little bit of, oh no, not another tradition. Like, no, I am full. I do not need another tradition. I don't really like in my ego self. I was like, I do not need another path. No, I've got so much going on. I need to just focus on one of the many things and it was a time in my life and this was let's see this was the fall of 2021, so we were still very much in like the height of the pandemic. Things were pretty dark in some sense, I want to say globally at that time, And then there was this eclipse. I mean, I don't often look back at my life and say that eclipse, on November 17th or whenever it was. But this one felt like a lightning bolt because it was basically around my birthday. So my birthday came in and then the eclipse was coming in, and I felt like it was this lightning bolt that just came in and shattered my life in some really deep dimensions. I had a relationship end that I thought was most certainly going to end up in marriage and, kind of healing our family. And that just like dissipated in a very dramatic way, very painfully, actually. And then I got sick. I had an Epstein-Barr outbreak. It took me a long time to figure out what happened to me. It took 10, 11 months to figure out it was actually I was a physical illness on top of like deep emotional pain. But it was like on every level, like spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. I just collapsed. I had to work half time. I barely left my PJs. I'd put on a black sweater and my PJ pants that I would be already wearing from bed. Every morning I woke up with terrible anxiety. For months it went on. Terrible. Almost like panic attack level anxiety upon waking. I still had to solo parent my child who also had a lot of emotional distress, and it was literally nightmarish. And then you know how it goes. A series of synchronicities occurred, and then rarely has this ever happened to me. This might be one of only two times in my life where I felt like I was hearing God. And I know that we don't hear God necessarily. God comes through the angelic realm, and so we receive God through the angels usually. But I heard very clearly from what I understood to be God that I needed to drop everything that I was doing, all my traditions, all my practices. I had spent all this time building an elemental temple that I was leading, and I very clearly received the message: stop doing that. The rattle, the drum, the medicine songs, all of that needs to be tabled. All the deities that I had around me, really have a strong affinity to Kuan Yin. So I have, several Kuan Yins. I have all kinds of spiritual things, little altars everywhere in my home of things that have been meaningful to me spiritually and felt supportive or protective. And I was asked to delete all of it and to only focus on God. No intermediaries, no lower forms, nothing. And it was direct, and I was in such suffering at that time, and even perilous. I was kind of like, this doesn't look good. And so I said, yes, I'm going to drop everything. Whatever you want. I'll, delete shamanic practice, delete any other mantras, delete all other deities and forms, like delete. And I went through my house, I cleared it of all these, different things. It took a long time because I was very attached, especially to the goddess. The goddess has been such a multiple lifetime priestess, daughter of the goddess affiliation. So much love there. And then a friend sent me a podcast. I listened to it. I loved the teacher. He had also traveled the world and learned all these different healing modalities and came to Islam and decided this was it. Actually, this was the most powerful healing he'd ever witnessed. And so he converted from Judaism, the medical doctor. And then I realized that all of my closest soul friends from Miami, it was so dear to me, these folks, including my best friend, had all been with this teacher or been with his teacher. And I was the only one in the circle that had not, actually. And so it was as if the whole tradition had been around me for many years, but I had never stepped in. And so I just decided to do that. And as soon as I started implementing the basic practices, every morning when I had my panic anxiety, I would start astaghfirullah, start the mantras, and my anxiety would be eliminated. And when I kept on doing the recitations and the practices and committing and turning towards God more and more fully, surrendering to God more and more fully, things started shifting. Physically, I got better. I had all sorts of healing experiences, not only me personally, but also my son. I watched my son, every time I would receive a healing, he would be healed. And so he just got better and better. And so it's been like that for almost 3 years. And so it just feels like a lot of confirmation that I certainly was supposed to go down this path. But I did have some reservations, and you know, still, I have such an affinity with different spiritual paths or practices or teachers and ones that I hold dear. And I keep turning, I keep turning to God,
Wow.
knowing that all of that is contained within God.
Yeah. That sounds like like wow. Lots of transformation, lots of when in the Buddhist practice or even in yoga, non-attachment, like whoa, what a testament to non-attachment. It's like take everything you think you know and goodbye to it all, start from zero, and we're just gonna build it back up with one thing, the thing. No.
Exactly. Yeah. And that it felt a little sad sometimes to feel like, oh, I'm going back to the absolute, I'm going back to zero. I would show up in the tradition with people who had been there for 20 or 30 years, and I was like, wow, gosh, I'm at zero. Just starting at zero. But it's the beginner's mind, and it also
Hmm.
felt like this really opened the pathway for humility to me in such a deeper way because I was completely at zero. Um, and I had been suffering so profoundly, essentially, for 7 years at that time, or 5 years, 6 years at that time. Very heavy suffering, persecution, a lot, a very intense struggle. And at some point, when none of the other practices were working for me, I felt like, okay, maybe it's time to do something different.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's, I can see because everything is for God essentially and by God. So it's, if I hadn't suffered so much, then I might not have been willing, aka desperate. I wouldn't have been willing to just leave everything that had been meaningful to me prior behind. But the suffering was so intense and prolonged and included my child and loss on every level that it just made sense in a way. And I felt intuitively when I received my Sufi name. You take something called a Sufi promise, and that's your dedication to God and pursuit of holy union, holy marriage with the divine. And when I took that, I knew that my name would be my path. And I knew because it's essentially a sort of a patriarchal lineage, all the Abrahamic traditions, the sort of the set, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they're kind of a set um, prophetic lineages, but I knew there was going to be a lot of healing for my father line, and that like I I needed that clear, holy, masculine presence in my life to help that healing start
Wow.
taking place. Like with my dad, I've seen changes, which very beautiful and so grateful. And then his lineage also was very troubled. And so it's just feels like it's working, especially to bring in the holy masculine, the divine masculine into our lives. And for my son, as a future man, that also feels very important. And he loves the prayers. I sing him the prayers before he goes to sleep. And he asks for them. He loves them. So I'm bringing this work now into client sessions if they are open to it. But certainly with my women's group, it's figured in prominently in the work we do in retreat, creating these chrysalis containers where we're working with spiritual healing in this ancient lineage.
Wow, that's amazing. I just want to take a moment of silence to honor what you just said. I want to get into the retreats. I want to know more about how you work this into your retreats. But it's interesting that you said this is a very masculine lineage and, the divine masculine. And there is a lot of focus around the divine feminine. Right now, I'm in a place where that is calling to me because there's a lot of healing that I've had to do there. And I think, I don't want to talk for you, but seeing the different things that you've been involved in, it kind of feels like, maybe there's a time for everything. There's a season for everything. And, you know, that divine masculine isn't something, I don't think I've ever heard that before because it's just the patriarchy. It's just associated with the
Yes.
system. It's just,
Yeah.
at least in a lot of women's, in, I feel like I'm saying this wrong. I'm probably saying this wrong. Forgive me, everybody, if I'm saying this wrong. I've never had this conversation before, but it feels like,
Mm,
the dude is the bad one, is the evil one,
mm,
and we're reversing when
mm-hmm.
back then it was like the woman is the bad one, she's the evil one, and now we're healing that, we're coming out of that. But a lot of times lifting that up tends to make the other one evil, like the yin and the yang. But being
Mm-hmm.
able to lift both up in their own holy and divine way is really beautiful. And I do think that there's a lot of healing
Yeah.
in that masculine line that needs to be done because not a lot of men knew or know how to show up in that divine way,
Yes. And, I think we're all learning and growing in some sense, and we're all on our path, and we follow the guidance, even if we don't know we're being guided in some sense, we are being guided. And my felt sense and the kind of strongest point that keeps coming to me over and over again now for probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months is that our purpose here is to be pillars of light. And what we are supposed to be doing in our highest incarnations is bringing heaven to earth. So, the most beautiful qualities, the most upright, the most noble versions that are coming essentially seeded by the divine. So, in Islam and therefore in Sufism, because Sufism is the mystical form of Islam, there are what are called the 99 divine qualities. So these could be the divine quality of truth, divine quality of love, the divine quality of peace, or gentleness. And so these exist, they essentially emanate out or down, what have you, from the Godhead itself. And it's a certain way that the divine comes through the veils. And so these are seen as lights. And what we can do essentially is to invite these lights into ourselves much more deeply so that an alchemical transformation occurs where we begin to physically embody these lights, and we're embodying at the physical level, emotional, mental, spiritual, soul level. So we become filled with these lights. And then we are living testaments to the heaven or the most refined, highest vibrational qualities that exist in the creation. We become the carriers of those here on earth, and they come from us, and they work to heal us personally, but they're also working to heal the collective, our families, our lineages. So there's very specific practices around doing this. And so men can do this, women can do this, everyone can participate in refining themselves, essentially. And so when men do this, they're holding this quality of the divine or holy masculine, each in their own way, because we each have a masculine side and, or I should go right, masculine and feminine side. And we're all in a balance around that. So, especially for women, helping to heal our inner divine masculine is very important. And I just really struggled in Sufism with the focus on the men, because I come from this sort of divine feminine place, and I feel like I've spent so many lifetimes in service to one or another form of the goddess. And all the talk about Adam and this, first, Adam came first. And, of course, my felt sense is like, no, no, no. The feminine came first. you know, but then on my last spiritual retreat, we call it a Zawiya, I sat with it because it had really been like burdening my heart. And I received very directly this insight that Adam came first in this tradition because the masculine is the form, it's the structure, and the feminine is what animates this form. So the structure comes, it happens basically simultaneously, but there has to be a sense of like a painting has an edge around it, there has to be a space for the feminine to reside in and to flourish inside of and to move inside of and to animate. And so that's the sense that I got, was that this it's important to honor the masculine because it is the structure, it is the order, it is the holding. And as much space holding as I do, that's actually for me, it's a bit of a masculine quality because I'm holding this space where then things can come into it or move through it or be supported or cared for inside of. And so there's a nurturance from the feminine, right? So this sort of holding space in a feminine way can be the sort of the nurturance. And in Sufism, so the qualities essentially go in an order. And the very first qualities in the order are at the very close to the beginning, Rahman and Rahim, which are mercy and compassion, which are the feminine. It's the in this Rahman and Rahim are at the beginning of every single prayer. So when you're going into a sacred space, the first thing you invoke after God is the feminine. The root of both of those qualities is RHM, which also translates to womb. So this also felt very beautiful to me in the tradition that there's such an honoring of this divine feminine womb that is an integral part of the beginning of creation that everything needs. You know, when I look at the world or feel into the world, especially right now, with all, the turmoil and the disaster and the loss, there's so much mercy needed, divine mercy. It's like that's the water element, right? And so then I get to go back to my elemental medicine, but you can feel the feminine coming through in this, the mercy. It's like the water that's soothing. And we don't have enough of it, So in every prayer we invoke that mercy, compassion. That opens the doorway for healing.
That's beautiful. It makes me think, I mean, the way Israel and I operate, excuse me, is kind of like that, like he builds the thing and I come in and I activate the thing. He is like, we often say, like, he's the Shiva and I'm the Shakti. He makes it,
Yes.
and then I'm like, all right, let's bring the people, let's put the things in, let's get the energy moving. So yeah, that makes sense to
Exactly.
me. So
Mhm.
how does that work in retreats? Like you were talking about creating this chrysalis, and you recently had a retreat. Was that yours?
Well, in the summer we had a retreat. So my women's group decided that they didn't want to end their container, and so it, we moved from this intensive 8 month um, immersion, 2 hours weekly meeting plus extra things, but it was all virtual. So we moved from that to opening retreat space in person because the world was changing, and now it felt like, okay, it's okay to be in person again. And so we started with a retreat, and then they decided they really liked that and they wanted to do a retreat every 6 months. So essentially, we're going to do a retreat every 6 months, and we meet in between as well, just to stay in contact and stay close. But the retreat spaces are very intimate, and what came through, because there's a piece that's come through recently for me around calling in the councils and understanding that leadership is sort of in this sort of like a pyramid form. It's more so in a council or a circle. So, it's a bit mysterious, but that came through, that these councils were important, like groups of people that are anchoring and holding space and supporting each other to bring through what needs to be brought through, either for an individual in their personal life or also for the collective or for their families or more broadly. And so what came to me that felt like it would really help this process would be to create something I'm calling chrysalis. So what we essentially do, and I bring in other teachers and things to do movement or to do energy work with them. We meet someplace that's beautiful and they can have a natural world experience. We do prayer practices in the morning. It's a way that I'm organizing everything so there's really healthy organic food, and there's a lovely woman that makes that wherever we are, and she could really contributes to our space and our time together for everyone to feel nourished and fed. But essentially, over the time that we have together, we break into these we break into the group, and it's for this group there are 5 women, so it's pretty small. And so we can spend a good 40 minutes or an hour with each woman. And so she's essentially in the middle. And then we're surrounding her, and then we're bringing in different prayers and singing to her and touching into like what's just that next sort of crest of the wave of healing that needs to be met so that that can be released and that that woman can move into a greater sense of fullness in her being. So that, and it kind of comes through, sometimes I'll end up sort of channeling something that's coming through. The women are channeling sometimes. In last retreat, the divine for the mother came through really strongly and was speaking to everyone. And so it's it's a very beautiful and dynamic space that gets created, and it does feel like we're touching heaven. Like there's this place where the heavenly energies descend, and then we're all in that space and then embodying it and letting it ground more here.
That sounds really nice. And this
Yeah,
the space you were in was really beautiful too. Really
it
beautiful. Was that
was.
in the US?
That was in Asheville,
Wow. I would
specifically
never have imagined.
Girton. Yeah, Girton, which is not, as we were saying there, it's not really a place. There's a little post office, but
Okay.
now with everything that's happened, you know, it, I'm really glad that we were there before, and yeah, my heart goes out to all the people in that area. I have a lot of family there as well. Yeah. So we did earth burials as well. So each woman connected in with the land very directly and personally and intimately in some sense, and received the blessing of the earth mama, Pachamama, this earth medicine of groundedness and protection and stabilization. And there's a lot of like releases typically when we do earth burials that occur um, just spontaneously, and shaking and trauma gets pulled out. And so those are very beautiful as well, and pretty profound. So yeah, we were able to have those in that space too.
I'm listening to you speak, and all of my skepticism growing up is kind of like rising within me because these are things that I do resonate with. But I know that for some, this is too woo, like it's out there a little bit. But I think we've are so disconnected from our true nature that we
Mm-hmm.
see things that once were very natural and very normal as woo, and we see ourselves in the monkey suit as the normal, and that is not normal. It actually, like, I have felt that way a lot when we go into society, and I'm like, I feel like a monkey in a suit. I feel like this is weird. I feel like, I don't know, we weren't meant to be living in this way, and we've just normalized it. So it's I would really love for the world to be more like that, to connect with the earth, connect with the elements, to go and retreat in nature and be in a space where connection to the heavens or connections to things beyond, what we can touch here in technological things in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I've always been drawn to the earth-based traditions. That's really deep in me, and I know it at a soul level. And so when I studied with Malidoma Somé, and he's since passed, but he really brought us through a number of these elemental initiation experiences, which are very common. These are commonplace. They're forms of medicine in and of themselves, ritual and ceremony for healing and for helping ancestors and for helping lineages and for honoring the earth, spirit, Gaia. These are, in a way, this is more common around the world than the monkey suit that we do in modernity. Most countries in the world do not divide spirit and matter. They don't divide, those aren't separate things. They don't have much of a secular orientation of separation of church and state. This was a European invention, the Age of Enlightenment, that we're living with and is maybe coming to the height of its polarity, in some sense, right? Where in an extreme way, we've decided that there are things that God isn't involved in. And that isn't true for most of the world. Most of the world is fully on board and never left the original positions that spirit and God are involved in everything. And the world is animistic. Everything, all of the matter is inhabited by spirit. So, in a way, what I loved actually, because we have this sort of like a Miami connection, but what I love about Miami is there was so much more permission there because there were so many people that came from cultures where this knowledge had not been lost. And ritual and ceremony were not necessarily so foreign, right? It was, oh yeah, my grandmother did this, or yeah, we know the mountain people in the Andes that do this, or this was not wasn't so strange in some sense. And most of the world is like that, holding on to these very old traditions that, Western Europe and the US, maybe Canada, have, for over few hundred years decided there was a reason not to do that. And I do agree, the church had a stranglehold on society. And so things need to be separated out to be able to study science outside of religion, for instance. But what I love about where you live, everywhere there's the goddess, right? Everywhere, in everyone's yard, there's there's
Yeah.
some depiction, right, of the goddess, and that's accepted. The primacy of the mother, Tonatsin, she's there and she's alive and well and thriving. And how would I feel about the US if you drove past everybody's yard and they had some sort of goddess figurine in the yard? I'm not saying that women are always treated well. That
No.
I'm not saying. No. But there is some idea that there's a holiness to the mother, right? So I think there's a way that these ancient threads are being preserved
Yeah.
in most everywhere around the world.
And they're coming back because people are searching, people are looking for something else. Yeah, that's a
There's
whole.
that's a
We're just gonna
whole, I
like
know.
go down, and I'm gonna bring us back over here to the
Yes, yes.
to the retreat space. Yeah, we because I mean we're like 40 minutes in, and I could do a whole nother 2 hours talking about this stuff and religion and okay. So retreats. Coming back to retreats. Mm, so are these retreats only for your community? Like, are other people allowed to join?
This series that's happening with this group is closed. My interest is to offer it in some kind of format to a new group that would want to commit to each other at least for 4 months or so. The I find personally, because I've gone on many retreats, I don't know, 20 years or something of going on different kinds of retreats or meditation retreats, etc., that sometimes something very profound happens in 2.5 days or 2 to 3 days on a retreat. But then after a little bit of time, it's almost as if that just fades. And there's a way that it's not, the whatever has come has not really integrated. And so I don't have any real desire to just do a retreat.
Yeah.
So what my more core interest is to offer a container that includes a retreat or two or maybe three, so that there's an opportunity to really go to depth, because that's my core sensibility, is that maybe it's because I'm a Scorpio. I just like, I want there to be
Whoa.
depth, and I want to really help facilitate, and of course God is doing everything. I'm just sort of there in a some form or fashion, supporting the process, but that there's a deeper embodiment that's taking place that is being supported through more regular engagement, including retreat, but not limited to just that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
you brought up a good point, because that's another reason I wanted to talk to you, because you've been this huge voice for the importance of integration
Hmm.
in all kinds of retreats and ceremonies, because we can have, a mind-blowing experience that just rocks our world and changes everything, and we're like, oh my god, I'm a new person, I'm going to go do all these things, and then a week later we're right back to whoever we were that we didn't want to be anymore. So
Exactly. Or
so
thought that we weren't,
or thought that we weren't, yeah. So this is
potentially.
your way of doing it now, like this container. So it's this extended period of contact where it really gets ingrained into who you are.
Exactly. And I think we're all on the path to wholeness, and ultimately we're on the path to unity. And so we need to be able to practice. Sometimes what's coming through in a retreat space and a ceremonial moment and alchemical moment, we still need to practice that. We had to keep experiencing it, supporting it, nurturing it, reinforcing it. And what I love about the container is that because it's a group, you have the medicine of the community. And there's so much medicine that comes through the different people that end up joining together. They don't know each other usually beforehand, but they come together and everyone's playing the part that they need to play for each person. And each person is being held by multiple people in the process. And so that to me is also very important, to have this sense of a community that's truly supportive. I think a lot of us grew up in families perhaps that couldn't really meet us in this way, or in communities that couldn't necessarily meet us. And so we do really benefit from joining a community that then can not only can hold space for us as we're evolving, but also that we have the opportunity to hold space for others. Because sometimes we can kind of end up in this victim mode where we forget that we're actually quite capable of being of service and being supportive to others, even if we don't feel like we're having our best moment in life, and to know that we can still show up in a good way for others despite whatever's going on for us. It helps reinforce our sense of capacity and the beauty that comes from being in community. And a number of my women are sort of, they're rewriting their family dynamics, like how they are with their kids, how they are with their partner, etc. Like through this work of learning, oh, we can be in community in a much healthier way. I can show up differently. I can support my children, in a different way. And that's really beautiful, because ultimately we need healing community. We need our communities, because it's hard to be alone, and we're social creatures, and I don't think we're really meant to be alone. I think we're meant to support each other and co-regulated the nervous system. And, someone else can see your blind spot often a lot better than you can see it.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
we can meet each other in this kindness and this mercy of, I don't have it all figured out either, but hey, sister, you know, this maybe right here, this feels like something that you may want to, let's all find a way to be with you in that, and maybe it shifts. And so it's it's a repatterning, not only at an individual level but at this more social community level as well, that's needed.
And what I really love is that, I mean, when you go to a retreat that's just 3 to 5 days or however long, but it's just one, you're getting to know people, you know? So there may be some vulnerability because walls do come down because we know the space that we're in and we're all here to do the work, but there still
Yes.
is this like, you're new. I'm gonna show enough, but maybe I'm gonna hold. But doing this over time may also help people get to know you in a way where they feel more confident in calling you out or helping you out or doing things that they wouldn't normally do the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
seeing your blind spots, but also it could be, telling someone, I noticed that you're really hard on yourself. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't be so
That's a
hard.
blind spot.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I guess
Well,
I
I mean,
saw a
it could
blind
be
spot as something that you're
you
doing
don't see.
wrong. Yeah.
Oh, I would never, I personally don't want to frame anything as like doing wrong, because I think that's something left over from our childhood and maybe,
Okay.
the sense that we're doing something wrong. But, I said to a client the other day, I said, what would happen in the morning if you just woke up and said, what would be respectful to myself today? And then you did some of those things that are on the list, because there is a deep need, I think, that we have to respect ourselves, to honor our boundaries, to do things that are good for us. And so sometimes, like, our blind spot, like you said, is that we don't, we're not, we treat ourselves very harshly, or we talk to ourselves in ways that are highly punitive and separating. And if we're someone else, first of all, if we see someone else doing that and we see that it is not helpful, then we can look at ourselves and do some reflection and self examination also to see, hey, I'm doing that same thing. And it didn't feel good when she was doing it. And I probably, like, I probably don't want to be doing that either. So we see ourselves in some sense through others. And in the community, you get that opportunity also to see your patterns in somebody else. And then that's really helpful, because women will often say, I so related to what XYZ person said because I'm also doing that same thing. And I see now that XYZ, right? But I will tell you, Crystal, that insight is not enough. Knowing what we're doing, or our blind spot, or what have you, patterns, knowing what they are is helpful. But being able to make the change,
Oh, yeah.
that for me, that is fueled, that ability to have the pattern shift, to me, is a gift from the divine. That is calling in the divine energies to meet the places inside that are unloving with the most pure form of love that exists, coming straight from God. Then, when we meet our own places of emptiness, or places where we just kind of curled inside with something so beautiful, and that comes in, then that changes us. So that's a gift from the divine. And then I see the patterns shifting more.
I really
I'm
like
sorry if
that.
I cut you off there also.
No, I don't even know what you're talking about. So
Okay, great,
I didn't
great.
see it. Wow. This is probably one of the deepest, which makes sense. You're Scorpio. I didn't know that. That's very cool. I like Scorpios. I'm a Virgo.
Oh, Virgo. Virgo's my north node.
Yes. Oh, nice. I don't know what that means. I don't know enough.
It's your north node is where you're aiming. So for me, because of the
Okay.
Virgo, and I'm sure you understand, like I have a strong desire towards beauty, creating things that are beautiful, like having a certain it's a bit of
Oh
perfectionistic
yeah.
sort of quality, but it's refined where it's a sense of okay, okay, yes, this is sort of the vision for what it is, and this is how I want everything arranged and the quality of everything. So I'm oriented towards that in my
Okay.
life. Hmm.
Yeah. Now I remember. Mine is Aries because mine just came. The Aries Libra. That's mine.
Ah, uh-huh. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Okay, so your south node is in Libra.
Libra.
Okay, so you come from Libra and you're going towards Aries. Hmm.
That's
Okay,
interesting,
so
right?
like fire.
Oh
Yeah, like
yeah.
initiating things. So it makes sense that you're
Yes.
initiating a lot of things and creating a lot.
I definitely feel like, you know.
Yes, exactly. 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 That's beautiful. Oh, I love that for you. Yeah. It makes sense why retreat though, too, because there's like in a retreat, there's so much organization of a space and the container, and it's really important to have a sensitivity to all like the Virgo. I feel like probably helps you like have a sensitivity to how everything's woven together and
It helps with
creates.
organization and structuring
Mhm,
things and
mhm,
yeah, like I mean, part of the reason why I'm doing this is just to bring minds together because
mm.
it's too much stuff, and I've mentioned this before that I've tried to do these things on my own and you can do it. And not I don't know that it's sustainable. And so there's this like need, drawing me toward community. Like, yes, point the
Yes.
way, but bring people with you and make the numbers bigger. And that way, each person has their specific zone of genius that they can,
Yes.
bring to the table and make the experience even more and
Mhm.
spread it more.
Mhm. Yes. So, because it is unsustainable, I think, to do it alone. And that's also what I'm feeling with the councils is like groups of people helping anchor the frequencies that are wanting to be embodied in the human realm, like bringing heaven to earth, helping things open more. And so I love your vision and how you're organizing.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. Thank you.
Yes. We'll see where it goes. Indeed.
So, as far as retreats go, we've talked a lot about the, spirituality. And I think that that's really important. I'm really glad we got into it because usually I'm talking about all the logistical, challenges. But this was a really nice conversation. So I was like, like we were saying earlier, just let it be, let it flow, let it go. But I do want to ask you, since you've led a lot of these and you have experience, is there any advice that you would give for people who are leading retreats or even retreat spaces?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, retreats for me require a lot of organization. And so there's all the logistical pieces, and sometimes those can be kind of weighty and you need time, like 6 months, 4 to 6 months. retreat spaces often book out sometimes a year in advance. If you happen to want to do a retreat anywhere that has weddings during a wedding season, that can be really tough. So sometimes it's really helpful, like as far in advance, as you can plan to go ahead and attempt to do that, just to secure the space. And I'm always developing a network of on the ground people that can do the cooking and can help out. I'll often have an assistant at my retreats. With the number of people that I have currently in this container, I don't feel like I really need an assistant. But I certainly bring people I respect in to teach things that aren't my zone of genius, bringing sound healers in or etc. to help complement. So for me, offering something in the retreat beyond what it is that I offer always feels great. That there's a sense of women, the participants being met on different levels and helping also to help them integrate the work that's happening through these other modalities and through the natural space. And I usually honestly just channel whatever we're going to be doing. So I'll sit down at some point when the opening happens and just write out the schedule. But I just secure the space. That's done, and then then I'll animate the space like we talked about before. So but I kind of like I do the structure first. Usually I'll have a vision for it, but I'm doing the structure and creating these longer containers that are virtual and in person. I'm already creating a larger container that the retreat is just part of, and so that's a bit different than just doing the retreat on its own. I think it's wonderful if people can iterate on the same form of the retreat. So if you've done it once and then you can just do it again, maybe in the same place, and everything you've already done a lot of the work already for the location and knowing the contact people and knowing what it's like there, because sometimes there are surprises going into retreat spaces where you didn't realize the house had this or the property had this, or because you've never been there before. So it's nice if you can go back to some place you've already been and maybe just find your own ways to kind of tweak or improve upon the original incarnation of a retreat. I think that's lovely. Um, yeah,
That's
I don't know. Is that
interesting.
helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm pretty sure that lots of people have, that I've talked to have done the retreat at the same space, but they never mentioned it. Like they never mentioned it. So, when that thing is here, but you never look at it until someone points it out and you're like, "Hey, that's really interesting." I mean, I think about when I'm building systems and processes and on a computer just for marketing, right? You build a template and then there's
Yes,
less effort, energy, cognitive
exactly.
load, and you just rinse and repeat. But
Exactly.
like you said, it's not just that you're doing the same exact thing, you're just using similar pieces, and then that frees your mind to look elsewhere and make it better in other ways, right?
Exactly. Because you can always feel in a retreat once you're in the retreat that, oh, this would have been good or that might have been good. And often I could sometimes move things around in the retreat if I feel like just all of a sudden there emerged this need and it seems like we need to go in this direction instead of the direction that maybe I had originally thought about. So I will also often pivot in a retreat if I need to. If I feel like the energy is moving in this other way, I'll just go with that. So I trust my intuition a lot too, around the things that can shift and change, because I do feel like it's an organic and alive space. And so I don't also want to just stick rigidly to the same thing if it feels like we need to pivot and do something different. And I will tell the participants ahead of time, this is a rough idea of what we're going to be doing, but I reserve the right to change something if I feel like we need to do something different. So I give everyone a heads up about that. And some people, really are there. they do well with grounding into their own sense of the structure. And it could be slightly disturbing to people if you suddenly change something and they're like, wait a minute, we were supposed to have yoga now, and now we're not doing it, and I'm upset, or, right? I got attached to that. So I just like to give people just a heads up that we might shift or change, depending on what's going on. But it
Okay.
is nice if you don't have to recreate the wheel every single time.
Yeah. Wow, that's good too. That's another thing. I mean, that people don't talk about. You see, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I know you'd have those golden nuggets. Just being able to be in the moment.
Be in the
And
moment.
so, I mean, you have the schedule, you have the plan, but it's not the rule, it's just a guide.
It's a guide. Yeah. It's a guide, and therefore I never really write down anything I'm going to say, or at this point I don't have any sort of like script that I operate off of. I'm mostly just channeling in the space of what seems important to say when,
Yeah.
and that's what I go with.
Okay.
But I've also been leading transformational groups for, well, more than 10 years, and then working as a kind of a helper healer type for longer. So it's all improvisational anyway, all of that. So
Wow.
I honor that. It's improv.
Yeah, maybe for you, I definitely need I need to write things down. Maybe it's my
Well,
Virgo
I mean,
brain. I just feel
I'll
like I
have,
need.
yeah, exactly. It's the Virgo bit, but I'll have some points usually of this
Okay.
feels like something important. This feels important. Because I'll sit down before and then, okay, yeah, this is a bullet point, you for whatever reason. But I tap in, we tap into the space. And so then, and I'm tapped into the group also. So different groups are going to evoke
Yeah,
different teachings.
that's true.
Right. So that's why I like the chrysalis structure is that it's very highly adaptable to anyone. It's not it's not like here's me and I'm going to teach you my stuff. I don't I tend to feel like I'm kind of in call and response with a space or a retreat group, that they're bringing something and then I'm responding to it or responding to something in the space. I feel into the vision or what feels like it wants to be birthed, because there's some sense of like this, spiritual midwifery of we're birthing something together. So I'll sometimes get a sense of what is that that's wanting to come through. But then, the structure is very responsive to each woman in her own way.
Wow. That's years of practice, very deeply connected to your intuition. You are next level retreat leading.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. But thank you for saying that. And I just,
Yes.
my interest is just to be helpful and to show up in a good way and to be honoring of each person in at all the levels, their spirit, their soul, their heart, and really be in contact in that sense. And so it is what it is in a way. I just sort of I go with that, and then usually good things happen, and it just, I don't know. We
Yes.
learn as we go along.
Well,
Yeah,
this
but I have
has,
had a lot of teachers as well. So
yeah,
I didn't make all this up in my own head. People would say, "Is this something you created?" And I often say, "No. No, this is what people have been doing for a long time. I'm just doing my version. I'm doing a version of it here."
yeah.
It's not new. Like there's no trademark with this really. It's just being with people in a deep way.